The player with the best name in chess, Sina Movahed, and he will be able to play with freedom as the game begins. Hans with white starts. It's a Sicilian, and okay, we're going towards the Alapin variation, a c3 Sicilian, trades in the center, a set of pawns leaving the board, and Sina Movahed getting ready to fianchetto. I love this opening. It's my personal favorite from the white side. White often gets good attacking chances due to the advanced pawns in the center. Sina Movahed will be trying to neutralize that by trading off the light squared bishops.
You want that bishop off the board as quickly as you can if you're black. Eyelining that light squared pawn at the edge of the board on h7. With the pawn that's already pushed halfway across the mark, e5, Hans makes his intentions clear. For the rest of the game, his focus will be on the king side.
Exactly. He'll try to attack. That's the direction White's two central pawns are pointing. First, you need to get pieces into the action. Some of White's pieces still asleep. Black needs to get castled. Sina Movahed starting with a very high heart rate. We must say that's the baseline. The game, of course, still in its infancy. He gets his bishop out, gets ready to castle. Can Hans strike? He trades off the knights, or at least he wants to remove Black's central knight. Maybe the best minor piece right now.
And you want to do that on your terms. If black was to take that knight, it just means that that double pawn chain becomes a triple right there, with the base moving to c3, which consolidates the center even more. First, it's the pair of bishop that comes off. Then the knight's taken off the board. Two tempting options. Will he capture towards the center, Hans Niemann?
Ooh, it's a matter of taste here, capturing towards the center. Very, very tempting. Taking with the queen maintains a slightly more symmetrical structure, but he does take with the pawn. Connect 3 for now with those white pawns. Black wants to castle, but the central pawns are going to start advancing for Hans Niemann. That's why Sina Movahed has paused. He might be trying to prevent White from advancing, but no, he decides, first order of business, get the king to safety.
And I'm expecting Hans to continue with development, get the bishop out, get the rooks connected, and eventually look at the h-pawn ramming up the board. You still want to get that pressure going. I talk about going up the board. It's the d-pawn he strikes with, and a big threat. If you don't do anything about that pawn, it was about to move forward and trap the bishop.
Yeah, that pawn had to get gone. It had to be removed from the board. The black rook in the corner was hit. Now it's defended by black's queen. The knight jumping to the edge of the board. That is because it's going to jump towards the center next move. We might see that now. Slightly awkward square. There's a hit now on black's isolated central pawn. White's queen and rook lined up. It does look like Hans is applying some pressure, but with accurate play, maybe black can neutralize it. And actually, long-term, Tanya, black's doing pretty well.
It looks like that, especially because you've got a target of your own if you're Sina right now. That pawn on c3 is tender on an open line, always looking at doubling up the queen and the rooks and having the pressure on that pawn as counterplay. Right now for Hans Niemann, how does he connect his two rooks? Will he bring out his bishop to line up against the queen, or potentially even offer a trade of the dark squared bishop?
That would be a very logical idea right now, to try and play energetically with gain of tempo. Trading off the bishops might allow the white knight to jump forward as well. The one move I don't think Hans will play here is white's queen going up 2 squares, taking a pawn. The d7 pawn would drop, yes, but black's rooks can slide across. There might be a skewer. White might be in a bit of trouble. I don't think white is quite ready to get greedy and grab pawns.
Ooh, that home rank looks incredibly terrifying. So he first does connect the rook, brings that out, and now remember, yes, c3 is a tender spot, but Hans Niemann eyeing that king side, a knight jump coming in, and either potentially threatening a checkmate, combining with the queen on h7, or landing back to the center of the board to keep everything defended after bishop takes bishop.
Big moment, the bishop tension now. Who is going to capture first? Who's going to blink first? As Tanya mentions, as black here taking the bishops off, now pushing your pawn forward would actually be a huge mistake. This is one trap Sina Movahed needs to avoid. Knight takes pawn now. There's X-ray vision, and the rook and deflected would drop the rook in the corner. That is why here, Sina Movahed has seen 2 moves ahead, and he's moved his rook across, making sure that the black rook does not get captured. It now defends its bishop. He wants the trade to happen on his own terms.
You know, you've got a name like Sina Movahed. You know, chess is in your DNA. That's where you belong. This is the stage that you belong in. He does bring the rook to that central line, David, making sure that things remain defended on that f7 spot right now. For Hans Niemann, how does he continue the pressure? Will he fall back with the bishop, or will he go into defense of the c3 pawn?
Yeah, big questions, and it's always so tempting to keep going forward. It feels like black's last move was defensive, therefore Hans wants to play on the front foot, wants to keep the threats going, but hard to find exactly how to continue. It might be a timeout situation. Just defend white's hanging pawns. They are isolated. That does, however, give black's knight time to reach the center, or at least stand on a nice outpost on c5. Hans weighing up his options. Both players are playing very quickly at this early stage.
And big questions lie ahead, so it makes a lot of sense to keep time on the clock. I also want to point out that right now, Hans has the option to go for trades by capturing the central d pawn. But once the dust settles, the pawns come off, the queen comes off, the bishops come off. There is an e5 weakness that you need to take care of, and very nicely set up by Sina in that last move, with the rook coming to that central file. So tactics, really good awareness there. Hans, meanwhile, retreats with the bishop. He keeps maximum tension. He's saying, take my pawn, I'm coming for yours.
Exactly, a very good move there from Hans, and it had to take a bit of self-restraint, it feels like. His bishop only just came out last move to drop back with the bishop, essentially having gifted black a free move there. He's showing zero pride there at all. He doesn't want to play defensively. This move is targeted at maybe capturing a black knight that might have landed, where the bishop has instead come to Sina Movahed, insistent on a bishop trade.
And I think he will insist on declining that bishop trade. Hans Niemann will, wanting to keep more pressure, more attacking possibilities. I'm expecting him to just go one step ahead behind that pawn. Also eye-lining the black queen, but not just that. Give Hans a couple of moves. We're going to see h4, h5, h6 on the board.
Yeah, and that's because white's pieces, they're kind of located already near the black king. Black's king has zero defenders around it. You could argue maybe the black rooks, but they're pretty passive right now. Black's knight is so far offside. That's the trigger, right? That's the signal that it should be the king that Hans Niemann is going for, and he definitely has it in its sights. First, he needs to defend his pawn, Sina Movahed. He needs to hold on to the d pawn, which is under fire.
For Sina, the problem child has to be that knight at the edge of the board, and it still requires some time to come to the center. He might very well be forced to retreat, to move forward towards that center, and he doesn't look happy with the placement of his pieces right now, struggling for a response to Hans's last move.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the last few turns, they have gone in Hans's favor. It's definitely white with the threats, white who's making the running. It feels like the black piece is not quite coordinated. I really hate the position of that black knight. I know I've mentioned it before, but that's definitely the worst placed piece. Black's rook, the one next to the king on f8, that stuck as well. Black's bishop a bit in the way, and the knight has to go all the way home just to defend a mere pawn. A sad move, but maybe the best of the bunch. And Hans now will be hoping to initiate that play. Tanya, when in doubt, push the h-pawn.
Always a good plan these days. h4 in the air will put more pressure, but Hans first steps in with the knight, again looking at the direction of that black king. The white queen ready to step back, threatening some big checkmating ideas there as well. I have to say Hans is doing a brilliant job of putting pressure on Sina.
Fantastic job. Pushing the h-pawn would have been good too, but this is even more scary for Sina Movahed to deal with. Hans played it instantly. It is scary. An attack was brewing, so the black queen steps forward, offering a trade. He's seeking safety in an endgame potentially, but Hans unlikely to want to exchange, especially not taking now on black's terms. If the queen trade's going to happen, he'll want some concessions along the way. I'm expecting Hans to continue trying to attack, but okay, he says queens can come off, but only at the cost of allowing the rook up the board. The knight now perfectly positioned in the center.
Well, that's a beautiful way to get the trade in. You know, your rook steps up, getting ready to double up on the d file. You've made sure that the black knight doesn't come into the game, defending that d7 pawn. So not a happy choice for Sina to even trade off at this moment. If not, the knight's ready to jump further into black's camp on that d6 square.
Oh, this is such a dilemma. You want the queens off, but you don't really want them off right now. That only helps white gain a move, white's rook improving itself. But if you delay the queen exchange, Hans might at some point say, okay, I've offered it, but no longer, and retreat. And black's just going to be super passive.
And I want to just tell everyone watching to pay attention to one idea that could be on Hans's radar. That a-pawn that's easy to forget about. You know, we've been talking about h4 going up the board. Hans could be looking at the other side of the board, trying to create some weaknesses with a4, a5 in the air.
Exactly, that would be a very logical minority attack. This one weak isolated pawn for white, trying to trade off and isolate one of black's two pawns. 1 versus 2, but ultimately black will be left with the weakness. Other modes of improvement. Maybe you could keep the queen on the board. This white rook in the corner, that's why you want to push the a-pawn there, Tanya. You want to activate it, but you could slide that across. Start pushing pawns of your own. So many tempting moves for Hans Niemann. He's spending a bit of time now, but he has a fantastic position.
And both players are on the 5-minute mark. I will tell you one option that you probably shouldn't go for is queen takes queen if you're Hans right now, allowing Sina to solve his problems, structural problems by recapturing with the pawn. And then suddenly we can imagine the pawn moving forward, the knight coming into the game, solving all problems.
Yeah, that's something you definitely don't want to do. It's a case of who blinks first. And Hans Niemann still pondering. He will not trade queens. He drops them back. Drops back that queen instead, lining up potential on the diagonal. But that shows his aggressive intentions a bit later.
I like it. Hans is wanting to have combative play in all phases of the game. A big opening. A stressful, tense-filled middle game right there. Doesn't want to go into the endgame just yet. And very resourceful by Sina right there, making sure that the white knight doesn't jump in. The queens will get traded off.
Exactly. Not quite a pin, but maybe a pin. And white definitely doesn't want that queen exchange now. He drops back the bishop instead. Black's knight at some point wants to move, but tied down defensively right now. Or is it? Can the black knight enter the action? And it does. White's queen cannot move yet. It has to hold its own knight. And, okay, it's F for forward for Hans Niemann. The F pawn marching instead.
And that was such a good moment, David, to use that opportunity to get the knight out. If queen takes pawn, maybe we can just quickly back up one move and show why instead of grabbing the pawn, we saw this pawn move up the board. The knight on e4 would have fallen instantly. And obviously, Hans, too sharp for this. He instantly moves up. And it comes with huge threats. I want to show what happens if black gets just a little careless here. Let's make a move on the left side of the board. I don't think Hans Niemann stops with f4. He's going to get f5 in as well.
F5 as well, hits the black queen, and that pawn is very, very poisoned. If you take it, the white knight jumps out the way with a check. No matter what you do next move, you lose the black queen. Undefended, loose pieces drop off. F for forward, as we mentioned it. Black blocks. Great move. Great defensive move from Sina Movahed.
So important that he made sure that Hans's f-pawn stopped exactly where it is. f5 would have been absolute disaster for black. He kicks the knight, and now Hans could get in a streamer's favorite move with en passant. Take that pawn, but that gives black just enough counterplay to get back into the game.
Exactly. That opens up the black rooks. For now, the black rooks look pretty stuck, blunted, blocked. But yeah, they would come to life if there was en passant. That's why he jumps in. Beautiful outpost that knight. Too strong. That knight is a bit of a stallion right now. And for Team Stallions, Sina Movahed will not want to see that survive much longer. He's going to take that knight, surely.
Well, you could have called it a godlike knight right there, and it's not allowed to live on for too long. Bishop takes knight. It does get out of the board right there. I have to say that Sina has been handling the pressure of this position incredibly well.
Yeah, and look how he's put all of his pieces on light squares. That's because white has a dark square bishop, and he's essentially playing checkers. He's just trying to control one color complex, and look at this. Tanya, I was not expecting that. I thought maybe he'd try and challenge rook, stay passive, but he's happy to counterattack here. Temporary pawn sacrifice to try and destabilize the white center.
So many of those Title Tuesday wins for Sina relied on tactics exactly like this one. Finding them quickly, playing them fast, and being precise right there. You take that pawn, you lose a key central pawn. The F-pawn also finds a way to march ahead for Sina if Hans decides to take it. And there has been a shift on Hans Niemann. He was bobbing around. He was enjoying his position once when the queens were on the board. It's not the case as much anymore.
Definitely not. It's still a 3-result game. Although the queens are off, that does not mean it's going to be peaceful at all. Counterattack from Hans Niemann. He hits the black rook with his pawn. That rook has to decide where to go. It has to stay on the F line defending its pawn. White saves his bishop, and Sina Movahed grabs in the center. White's pawns look very nice, at least that G6 pawn. It keeps the black king in a mating net, but it could also just drop off on the next few moves, and suddenly momentum might be turning.
Especially once Sina is able to lift his rook up to sever the connection between the white rook and that pawn. And that just takes one move to happen. So that's exactly why Hans wants to get rid of that attacker at the center of the board. Plants his bishop, getting ready to trade that knight off if we see rook f6.
Exactly. Very likely to happen. The white's rook on the 6th rank. Very strong, holds everything, attacks pawns itself. Maybe a rook trade. Or will Sina Movahed come up with more surprises after his last few moves? He looks like he's happier than he's ever been in this game, Sina Movahed. Clocks looking like they're under control as well, both around the same amount of time, just under 3 minutes. It's a blitz game. It's an end game. Tanya, who is going to come out on top?
It's a really tough one. I've been just so impressed with the way Sina's been handling all the threats that Hans has been piling on him. And look at it. It's him who decides not to go into a pure rook pawn endgame. He retreats with the knight, putting pressure on the bishop. And now he's going to trade and go for that stronghold pawn that white has on g6, bringing his rook up onto the 6th rank. there's no good way to defend it. And I think Sina maintains the balance. A draw with black is a fantastic start for the youngster.
Exactly. A draw is in sight, but temporarily at least, white is up a pawn. How long that lasts is a big question. Hans targets black's most far advanced pawn there. We could see white up a pawn, but ultimately should be a draw. But Hans has a little bit more time now. Maybe he'll try and continue the game as long as possible. Play for the flag.
And it's always such a good feeling when you're in an endgame where you're playing for 2 results. We see 1 pawn drop off. The f4 pawn is going to come off the board as well. For Sina, he's going to start targeting that weakness that Hans Niemann has on the left flank, lining up the rook against it. Hans will step back with his rook to defend it, potentially maybe even push the pawn. But then Sina just has to wait and keep everything under control, bring his king into the game.
Yeah, Hans Niemann would have serious winning chances if the white pawns were connected on that left flank. But the fact that they're isolated, the fact that they can't protect each other, the white rook has to maybe go passive, that should hinder his winning chances. But for now, while there's time on the clock, there's still life in the game. And Sina Movahed debating now whether to trade, whether to push. He pushes. If it's just 2 versus 1 on one flank, Tanya, that should be an easy draw if he had a bit more time. But for now, those pawns remain.
But that is such an ugly rook that Hans has taken on the edge of the board. It could very well have been on the F-line, making sure that Sina's king did not advance towards the center. Slightly surprised. Now compare all of Sina's pieces. The king at the center, the rook beautifully placed. Hans, extremely passive.
Extremely passive, but they do say take the teenagers to endgames, especially rook endgames. We saw Pranesh make a mistake in a rook endgame earlier. Will we see Sina Movahed unable to hold this draw? It does feel like there might be one big twist still left in this game.
A certain Magnus Carlsen came up with a term for that, David Howell. He said it's anti-young player chess, this one. When you get the queens off the board, take them to the endgame. And right now, Hans is giving up a pawn. He wants to set up pressure against Sina's G-pawn by lining up his rook on the G-line.
Exactly. Now he's asking black to go passive. Black can defend that G-pawn, but only by putting his rook on a really ugly square. He's ticking down on time. Hans has done a really good job of keeping an extra 30 seconds in the bank over his opponent. That could be vital a bit later on. Sina Movahed defending actively, trying to go behind with his rook. He spotted a target. White's A-pawn still on the agenda.
And that's what Sina has been doing brilliantly this whole game. Always going for a counter offense rather than a passive defense in this position, which is key in rook pawn endgame. Hans forced to take a pause before grabbing the pawn, getting his king closer to the defense of that A pawn at the other side. The B pawn moves forward. This is the moment Hans captures once again an extra pawn for white.
Exactly, an extra pawn should still be a draw because white's king is so passive, can never really move away from its own pawns lest they fall off the board. But he's got his eye on the clock, Hans Niemann. Sina Movahed needs to realize his biggest danger is not white's G-pawn, it's the clock.
And I'm going to say I've got my eye on Sina's heart rate right now. Touching 160 it is for the 16-year-old trying to defend a pawn down endgame. He's pretty much in reaching distance of that, David. Predictions. Does he hold this against Hans Niemann with 50 seconds on the clock?
It's 50-50 in my eyes. He does trade off a couple of pawns, Hans Niemann. I think he holds Sina Movahed, but it's 50% draw, 50% win for white. He's definitely not going to be winning this game, Sina. So we'll see how he can hold on. It's level material. I'm not sure about Hans's pawn sacrifice. Feels like it's made it slightly easier for the teenager.
That's the feeling. And if you push the G-pawn, Sina's ready to advance with the C-pawn of his own at some point. If we're able to trade these 2 pawns, that is an instant handshake right now. It's 2 versus 2. The C-pawn's coming up the board. Hans chasing it with his king. We're going to see more pawn trades.
Exactly. Black's pawn is not going to promote, but it might be able to give its life up for one of white's pawns. Nice move there from Hans Niemann. I think missed by Sina. So actually, it is a pawn advantage again for Hans. The white king is running. This is the best chance he's had all game. The white rook holds the second rank, holds the left side of the board, and the king is running. Only move now for black is to advance with his king to b4. He finds it, but this is going to be so difficult. Can white make progress? Can white's pawn continue running up the board?
And he needs to find the path to draw. He's found one right move, and again, check is the only way to stay in the game. He again finds the only move to hold the draw. And this is why he goes wrong. This is so incredibly hard. Hans Niemann is on the win. He needs to just keep pushing his pawn.
And now the white rook can slide across, defend itself with the white king. There we go. White's ahead in the race. Rook trade. White makes a new queen. Game over. And black's rook too slow now to get back, but the clock is compounding everything here. Sina Movahed, he's panicked, he's frozen, he can't find a move. White's pawn's about to land. 2 squares from touchdown, 1 square away. Queen coming. Resignation from Sina Movahed. Hans with the fist pump.
What a game by Hans Niemann, getting this win and kept piling on the pressure. And you could see it, how much this means to him at the end of it all. Gets the win. For Sina, he tried to keep it together, but being accurate with seconds on the clock, a task almost impossible.
Wow, so calm, so cool from Hans Niemann. Very professional as well. Never really in risk. It was a 2-result game. Did look like a draw for a long, long time, but he asked those questions right at the end, and Sina Movahed, no time on the clock, didn't have the answers. We said it, teenagers, rook end games, that tends to be where they get targeted, and Sina Movahed unfortunately couldn't hold on there.